Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our Tropical Weather Outlook, our weekly off-season edition for the Tropical Weather Outlook. It is December 15th, Sunday, 2024. Let's start off by looking at the current sea surface temperature anomalies. And as you can see, still remaining very warm in the Atlantic. The Caribbean also remains warm, as well as the Gulf of Mexico too. The Atlantic is generally above normal right now, although we're just getting into the winter months. Things could definitely change and things could potentially cool down. And I expect that we'll probably see some cooling down of the Atlantic as we head into the winter months. Um, but it is warm right now. Although I will say, even though it is warm right now, it's still too early to determine whether or not that means anything for next year's hurricane season. I mean, we literally just got off this previous hurricane season for 2024 just 2 weeks ago. But of course, as I said, this will be one of the trends that we watch throughout the winter and the spring. How warm does the Atlantic stay? And that'll be as we get to the spring. If the Atlantic still remains this warm or gets warmer, we'll see, because last year it got warmer as we headed into the winter. That'll then be a very important factor into what the outlook is for next year. In the Pacific, you could see it remains very cold along the equatorial Pacific. And in fact, if you compare from last week to this week, I think maybe it got slightly warmer. We're still in a cool ENSO in the Pacific, and we might actually be finally heading towards a identifiable La Nina instead of just a cool ENSO neutral. Now we might actually be heading into more of a solid La Nina state. If you take a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies in the Nino 3.4 region, which is right somewhere in here in the Central Pacific, and this is the area, the Nino 3.4, that is the area where we actually measure the sea surface temperature anomalies to determine what ENSO state we're in. And notice over the last several weeks, just how much of a decline we've seen in sea surface temperature anomalies. Very strong trade winds have prevailed along the equatorial Pacific, and that's very different, especially from earlier on, just two or 3 months ago, when we didn't have enough strong easterly trade winds, and it looked like that La Nina was not going to happen at all. Now it seems like we're going down very fast. We're below that negative zero point 0.5 threshold, which is usually the threshold we use for La Nina. So we're getting there. And once again, as I said last week, maybe we might be seeing a resurgence of La Nina occur. The SOI dashboard right now still remains strongly positive. The current value for the 30-day average is at 13 points. And as I mentioned last week, a strongly positive SOI, especially over 7 points, means the Pacific is generally stronger with the trade winds, and that is more favorable for La Nina. And that remains the case right now. And the 90-day average as well is slowly beginning to creep up. Not above 7, so I guess in terms of a long-term pattern, we're not really there fully at La Nina yet, but we're getting there. The 90-day average right now is close to 6 points positive across the board, and that's very much reflected in the zonal wind anomalies, the positive SOI. This is the 850 millibar zonal winds, and this is measuring the zonal winds near the equator, and this is the Pacific right here, and notice how much blues we have. That's representative of all those strong trade winds, which means, and that definitely makes sense as to why we've seen a stark decline in the sea surface temperature anomalies over the last several weeks. It was caused by a surge of very strong trade winds over the central Pacific, and that is likely helping us get towards La Nina. And it's noted by the latest Climate Prediction Center outlook that was actually issued this past week. They have the ENSO alert system now at La Nina watch. They still give a 59% chance that over the next 2 months or so, into January of next year, there's a 59% chance that they have a La Nina forming. And I actually have the latest Climate Prediction Center ENSO probability graph. You know, the graph that shows the probability through the seasons. Well, they also just updated this for December, and you can see as we head into the end of the year, into early next year, roughly around a 60% chance for La Nina still. And as we head into the winter months, December, January, February, they still give over a 70% chance for La Nina to occur. So I guess even though La Nina is not going to be as strong as what was predicted earlier this year, if you go back to my videos early on in spring of this year when we were talking about this hurricane season for 2024, lots of the climate models were very aggressive on the fact that we would have a pretty potent La Nina, and that contributed to the very active hurricane season forecasts. Obviously, it was still very active, but not as active as some of the forecasts were, but some of that was fueled by that very strong La Nina. But it still looks like, compared to maybe just 3 or 4 weeks ago, that we were looking like La Nina was not going to be much of anything, and we were kind of just going to be in this cool ENSO neutral state. Looks like the chance is still there after all for La Nina to occur, and this will be very interesting to watch as we head into next year to see if whether or not this lingers around or it warms up and we end up going to a warmer ENSO state. And with that, we kind of have a little bit of a snippet, a little bit of an idea of what people are thinking for next year. And I know it's December. It's why are we talking about hurricane season already? But why not? Tropical Storm Risk, which is a forecasting agency out of the UK, they put out their first prediction for the 2025 hurricane season. And I'm not going to read too much into this because, once again, we are literally just 2 weeks out of this year's hurricane season. So there's still so much that can happen. But generally, they're indicating that we will at least see, and I say at least because we don't know what's going to happen, but I'll generally consider this kind of like the minimum expectation for next year. Maybe it'll be max depending on how things go as we get towards the spring, but they're at least expecting a near, maybe slightly above normal season, 15 tropical storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes, roughly on par with the recent 30-year average in the Atlantic, which is roughly around 14 storms, 7, 3. So generally right around the average, maybe slightly above. And from what I was able to get, they generally expect ENSO to be neutral, getting warmer as we head towards the summer. But La Nina conditions will likely remain, weak La Nina conditions will likely remain through the winter. And how much La Nina persists, of course, if it still develops at all, and it's looking more likely that we will at least get a weak La Nina. How does it persist, and how warm does it get? How quickly do we transition away from this weak La Nina next year? This will definitely be an interesting factor into how next year's hurricane season will play out. I guess they're kind of considering the idea that maybe next year will be a little bit warmer in ENSO, which is why they're giving a more average hurricane season forecast, which hopefully they're right. Hopefully next year is more average instead of being very active, especially after how impactful this year was, and active, of course, but especially how impactful it was. I guess we could all use a break. But once again, it is literally still mid-December. We just got out of last year's hurricane season, so not going to really put too much stock into this. Moving on away from hurricane season, since there's nothing much else to really talk about. Current United States weather remaining quiet for now, although if you're in the Northeast, especially inland, look out because we might get a small clipper storm through tonight and into tomorrow. Might bring snow for portions of the interior Northeast, including Pennsylvania and just inland of the coast in the Northeast and New England. Winter weather advisories are in effect. The most snow accumulations I see that is generally expected in areas in the winter weather advisory is around 2 to 4 inches. So nothing insane, not like a big snowstorm, but there will definitely be some snow accumulation. So if you're traveling, keep that in mind. And in some of the Appalachian Mountains, especially West Virginia and southwestern Pennsylvania, looks like they might get a little bit heavier snow totals right around there. And because of that, there is a winter storm warning in effect. So wintry weather from tonight into tomorrow, expected for portions of the interior Northeast, and you can see that play out on the GFS. A small clipper system moves through. We'll bring some snow. We'll bring some heavy snow depending on where you are, but looks like it's going to be a very small system. Moves out within the next 24 hours, and then after that, seems like a front comes in, brings in more rain to the Northeast as we head into next week. This is coming from a very strong low pressure system that remains in southern Canada. And then next week, things actually warm up quite significantly, and I'll show you with the temperature anomalies. It's cold right now, and in fact, I'll show you. In fact, today it's in the 30s here where I live in New York. So cold weather still remains, but as we head into next week, any sort of precipitation we get will be rain because look at how much warm air comes in. And a lot of people have been talking about this for weeks that as we get towards mid-December, conditions would warm up. And unfortunately, there would not be much of a chance for snow. But then things actually do get interesting as we head towards the end of next week and towards the end of the month, because as we get towards the 7-day mark, we see a cold air surge once again in the east and in the northeast and in the mid-Atlantic. And there's actually a lot of talk about a potential low pressure system that develops off the east coast. Certain model runs and certain model guidances do certain things, but I've seen some solutions that have a system that kind of clips the coast and brings snow inland but rain in the coast. And there've also been, especially with the GFS, let's see what this model run does, but this latest model run, roughly around the 20th to the 22nd, low pressure develops off the East Coast, but it brings it out to sea. But if you go back just a few model runs, the GFS has had a tendency to show a pretty significant winter weather system, dumping a lot of snow along the coast. So that's causing a lot of talk on Twitter. Might the 20th be around a time that we need to watch for potential winter weather in the east? We'll just have to see because, we know how things have gone over the last several winters. Model runs would show heavy snow for portions of the Northeast, especially along the coast, but it wouldn't materialize. So we'll have to see how that pans out. But the opportunity does open up. Does seem like there's a low pressure that could develop off the East Coast around the 20th, and cold air does actually return. So if you do not like the cold air, enjoy the next few days because it will warm up, especially throughout most of the United States. Temperatures will be much above normal, but then it'll cool down once again as we head towards the end of the week and into next week and towards the end of the month as well. And maybe we'll get a chance for snow. We'll just have to see. With that being said, though, I'm going to end it off for this week. I'll update you throughout the week next week to see if anything changes when it comes to winter weather in the United States. As I said, I do want to focus on that a little bit more than just tropical weather because we're in the off season and there's not really much to talk about with the tropics, at least in our neck of the woods in the world. In the southern hemisphere, I know that there's stuff happening, but that's not really my focus, although we'll bring it up from time to time with our weekly tropical weather outlooks, which we're going to do on either Saturday or Sunday. I've been doing it Sunday for the last several weeks because that's when I got around to do it. But next week, we'll probably do this outlook on Saturday. At least once a week, we'll be doing these weekly tropical weather outlooks, either Saturday or Sunday. So if you want to look out for them and you're interested in what you saw today, please, I recommend you that you subscribe, like, share with family and friends. Let's, get the community growing. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. We will talk again very soon.